This is Alan Winston with barcrawlradio. This is a barcrawlradio Extra. I'm here at the First Trinity Lutheran Church Hostel, 501 4th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., with the Witness Against Torture people. This is 2020. It's in January. I was here last year with them. They come out to Washington, D.C., this group, Witness Against Torture, or W.A.T. Every year. They've been to Guantanamo. Why? Because they protest the imprisonment of the Muslims who were put there back in 2001, 2002, and who have been there for so many years, going on 20 years, and have not been given a fair trial. I'll be talking with the members of W.A.T. who are here, gathered here. We'll be asking who they are, why they're here, and what is the reason for their activism, what inspires them. And this is barcrawlradio Extra, coming from Washington, D.C.
Yeah, we got to hang out a little bit at the Dubliners last year, I remember.
That's right.
We talked about philosophy-ish.
Now I remember.
Did we have a conversation about philosophy? Something about your background was that you had
I'm remembering
questions.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. It was like the last night, most of us were here,
Right.
and we went out to the Dubliners, which is very close to the church here. And it was after everything was done.
Celebration.
And we were celebrating and having beers. What is it that we were talking about? I remember being very deep.
You did admit some kind of long form. Was it a dissertation question? But I know that you may have asked me then right back, well, who are your favorite philosophers? And I could have stumbled into some corner of existentialism, I'm sure. Or no, you maybe prompted me guessing.
Okay.
And then I felt a little bit caught.
Were we talking about semiotics or something?
I could have admitted just stumbling into
right.
Umberto Eco's thought. My name's Christopher Spicer. I'm coming down from the Mystic watershed of outside of Boston, Somerville. I live with my wife and my 2 daughters.
That's great. And what do you do there in Mystic?
I've been a stay-at-home dad now, going on 2+ years. As they've started their lives, I've been at home. And on Fridays, this is my one day that my actions on the Word. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of fiction writing, preparation.
You're a stay-at-home dad. That's wonderful. Do you enjoy it?
I don't hear that all the time, but I do believe it is wonderful.
I think it's great. I've never had a real full-time job. I've been an adjunct my whole life.
Yeah.
And one reason is so I could see my kids grow up. And I think I spent more time with my children at a young age than my wife did, because she had a full-time job.
Oh.
So I wasn't a stay-at-home dad, but I was there an awful lot because I felt like that was really important. Is this something that you're enjoying? I don't think it's for all men.
Playing with it, with the sense of my childhood coming back to me every day, does feel like a fit. I do lose my temper. I have a talent for how I lose it, which is what I think makes it work.
All right, well, you got to say something about that.
Oh, we have to have an ability as activists to have a slow burn to keep at it. Somebody once told me, keep the fire, but stoke the coals. And in the long haul. With kids every day, it's a matter of knowing where my limits being tested and how to reach out and build into my day times where and take a nap if possible whenever they're sleeping, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so. Oh,
I love the naps. I love the naps. Yeah. I wish I could do it over again, because now I'm much better at it with my grandson than I was with my own children. So. Just that, knowing what this process is as kids, because they get stubborn, they don't want to move. He's like 2.5 now. We're out on the street in New York, and I'm trying to get him to the library.
And the mittens.
And he won't go, and the mittens, and the coat, and I've learned a lot. So it's good. Sounds like you're way ahead of me. You'll be really ready for the grandkids.
Oh, well, God willing. We have such history ahead, or future ahead, and my parents are, now they're almost having their second winds of speaking of activism, they're, and where do we come from as activists? But they are the ones now telling me on the phone what they are up to, the trips that they're back to back doing, and what their causes is, and so.
Well, let's not talk about their causes, because maybe we can kind of. Why are you here at Witness Against Torture? What brought you here? What inspires you to come back? At least the second year. Was it last year the first year?
In the past 10 years that I've been a part of the fast, actually,
10 years.
It's a broad community. Not being here doesn't mean that we're not part of this community, and we find times to be in touch with people through email and through conference call. But 7 years I've been here, actually, part of the fast. This is.
And just so everyone knows, a fast is like almost a week-long fast. Well, you explain it. Why do you fast?
Men in Guantanamo said enough is enough and began fasting as a way that they reached the attention of the world. As far as I understand, from within the first 100 days, Karen Greenberg writes and reports about the early strikes, the hunger strikes. The model of the men is so important in the Witness Against Torture that what we're doing is echoing, and if we can microphone their stories to humanize. The tactic of fasting really touches that Gandhian bone in our nonviolence too. So I know we are appropriating a nonviolent political fast that's different than a privatized fast. So religious fasts do see the virtue of a private fast, getting in touch with oneself, and this, you can say there's a political theology to the fast. I would, and as a group, we would say that our spirituality in this fast is one that is so mindful about these men, and they're in front and center, have had to endure incredible torture, and the trauma of that, but they've not taken it, not done in a passive way. We've really seen the hope and the inspiration from what they do in response, and saying, we're going to fast, we're going to be active agents of our own change making.
You've obviously never met these men in Guantanamo. They've been there for almost 20 years, some of them. They're growing old there. Eventually some of them are going to die of old age there. Why do you feel connected to them? You're not Muslim, are you? Not that makes any difference. They are people.
How do we meet people, though? Mohammed al-Salehi is now making himself known to us by way of conversations through video. In the conference that was a year ago,
I was there. Yeah,
I got there just in time to see his lovely face, smiling and beaming, from Germany. Mm-hmm. So often we've gotten word from men in Guantanamo through their attorneys. And that has been another way that we've been meeting. But no, face to face. I haven't met the men.
But yet you feel something for them.
I do.
So what is this feeling? Where does that come from? This distant connection, very close connection in which you're putting your body, as far as fasting, you're putting your body on the line for them, and you don't even know them.
I just feel that we are seeking to know the men so much that I the poetry that we read of the men is just one act, or the painting of an individual in Guantanamo who's expressing himself in his visions of a cavernous cave in black with a white egg-shaped exit, gives me this sense, oh my, what a beautiful soul here is captured. And how do I meet somebody
who you've never met?
Who I've never met, right? But I can, in this community, I can find and center these men. So in the past, there's been our imaging and on large banners of their face.
Have you ever imagined meeting them face to face and talking? And sometimes we have an image of people in our minds, and then it turns out we meet them and they're not like that at all.
I want to admit that through that film that came out in 2014, there was something about who I imagined that was Mohammed al-Salehi or Mozam Beg, or or something of the Tripton Three. These are men who spoke English while they were detained, who were able to make incredible relationships with guards. And so I have imagined what it would be like to be in conversation with, these are the most sensitive, intelligent, from what we've read, their insightful disposition allowed people to really take stock. Men who had a 9/11 perception changing their faith. I read about this yesterday morning in the book called Place Outside the Law. But I am seeking to, as I engage again this year, find the new book, that A Place Outside the Law, that was just published in November, get into the interviews with men who have been released. 2 years ago, there's a book by Boumediene. And Boumediene's case that came forward for the habeas corpus was land-breaking into who I was as a 26-year-old then. So many years ago, we're talking about 2007-8, coming to the Supreme Court, and Boumediene versus Bush wins the right for habeas corpus. At the time, I'm in Chicago. I'm a student, and have begun to collect with other people, and we begin embracing this imagery that had made waves to us through the AP of orange jumpsuits and black hoods, and beginning to surface that images on our campus. We're forming a collective to do activism.
This is before you joined W.A.T.
Well, it was the extension of W.A.T.
Okay.
So I was in 2005. I'm in Portland, Oregon at the time, and hearing on the NPR a report of 25 activists on their pilgrimage. They called it a pilgrimage. As Christian witnesses, they used the imagery of the cross, and priests were among them. They had a mass outside of Guantanamo Bay Detention Center.
And some of the people that are here today were there.
We heard yesterday from Art Laffin about his participation in it. That's right. And I was then 3 years later. It was 2007, getting to community build in Chicago, and somebody who was part of Witness Against Torture, Carmen Trotta, who is now in
I've spoken
New York.
to him many times.
He was the one to come over and visit us in Chicago and say, "Hey guys, you want to do something to be involved in this?" And our community there was called Kairos Chicago, after the Kairos New York group in New York that we were seeking to, like Daniel Berrigan, break open the word and quite literally follow its blood-soaked steps. So we were, as again, in that circle of Christians, thinking about how we can really follow what it means today to be in the steps of Jesus. And that's the kind of activism model that I've been trying to work through.
So your religion
myself.
really informs your activism.
I see myself as somebody who's continually learning that it's religion that's a source, but it's a community of faith that is something that we practice. And this community practices the beliefs that I most enjoy,
right.
A joyful resistance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why you're here.
I'm continually fed by being here. Yeah, I want to come back to it. I want to see the people again, get in charge, hear the stories deeper of where we're going. I hear the humility of some of the veteran activists who will come and say, "I'm here because I need some direction." Kathy Kelly, 2 years ago, really may have been finding some dry bones with the Yemen, coming back directly
After
from
the children
trips.
were killed.
She was, and saying, "This is a community I trust. Where are we going?" That kind of humility, it's a sparking one. It's a sparking one for courage. She'll use that phrase, catching courage. And it's by being in community that we often catch up with each other, and where are the winds moving? Where are points of hope and strategy?
One of the things that you try to do as an organization is be heard. And that's why you go out and march in your orange jumpsuits, emulating the orange jumpsuits that the men in Guantanamo wear, sometimes with hoods on it. I just imagine you're going to be doing some of that action. What does that do to the rest of us? You're a community, but aren't you kind of isolated as a community? How do you get others, and I'm talking about the great masses, to see what you're doing and feel what you're feeling? Or is that not important?
Well, I do. Is masses something that I love the idea that power comes and is something that we give, and we have this consent that we all are part of this powerful sense of government. Neighbor to neighbor, though, we're interested in engaging people person to person, and if we can have dialogue through our actions, if we can spark the curiosity in a beautiful way, and spark a sense of this is a soulful connection. Let me listen a little bit more. I think absolutely. I'm so happy to be a part of a beautiful singing of rebellion, like yesterday when we said, "Rebel." And to sing that word, it's a wonderful feeling to sing that word in light of some panic that was maybe in some of our guts, right? And say, rebel against that war they sell, rebel against those lies they tell. And that kind of energy, it's a transforming one, right? And I do want to be heard in that, but I also am inviting people, I think, into singing with us. And that's where, yes, you can say, I am reaching a choir. I'm seeking out another person to join us, right? And maybe we are singing to the choir in that way when we are amidst each other who are progressive people. And yet we're all rationally equipped with an incredible discernment ability to trust each other in a democracy. And I trust that people who are skilled and ready to join in are also lighted up by these witnesses. I'm always, as an activist, finding that I'm actually trailing behind incredible work that's been done for years. Very humbled by the 17,000 hours of pro bono work that went into the Boumediene case, for instance. Pro bono. Law firms coming forward from the very beginning. And
the Kings Bay Plowshare 7 work that's been done.
I was there in Georgia for one of their hearings, absolutely. Yeah. Very humbled by their renewed commitment and appreciate that on April 4th they did their action. 50-year anniversary of Martin Luther King's being assassinated.
Right.
Yeah.
Christopher Spicer, thank you very much for sitting down with us here in the church here, and good luck. And I want to see this community grow. So get that dialogue going. Thank you, Christopher. Okay, Don Cunning has joined us here at the mics here at the First Trinity Lutheran Church Hostel. You've been a member of W.A.T for a long time. You were on our barcrawlradio at the Iron Horse Tavern last year, and you're back again. How many years have you been involved with W.A.T?
First year I came was 16. I came about halfway through because I wasn't sure that I could do the fasting.
Are you fasting this time?
I'm fasting this time.
Yeah.
It turned out not to be as bad as I thought it would be. So then for the next 4 years I've come from the beginning.
Right.
Stayed. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of things we could talk about, but I wanted to bring you over because at the circle this morning, Helen, who is the leader here of the organization, talking about not getting arrested.
Yeah.
That you're going to go out doing these protests. Today you're going to go to the Union Station in your orange jumpsuits, but the plan is not to get arrested. In years past, the plan was to get arrested. Let's start with that. Why get arrested? What's the point of getting arrested?
Well, I think it's important to term it correctly. Yeah. Risking arrest.
Okay, risking arrest.
We never come looking to be arrested, but we realize some of our actions could get us arrested. Mm-hmm. So we start from that.
Yeah, but I mean, risking arrest means somewhere along the line there are arrests, right?
It means wink, wink. Yeah, well, I don't want to be arrested, but I'm sure I will be.
What's the advantage of being arrested? Well, is there an advantage?
The advantage
to what you want to accomplish?
Yeah. Well, if you get enough people, for starters, 3.3% of the population can sway lawmakers in their decision. But for me personally, the reason that I decided at times to be arrested was because I want to be known on the correct side of the ledger. In other words, if someone says torture is okay, I want to be able to say, no, torture is not okay in any aspect, any reason that I can. There's no reason to be for torture, just some sick mind being satisfied for his own needs.
Right. The overall reason to be arrested is not to create consciousness in the larger population, to have other people see you being arrested or have them read about it. It's for yourself.
It's for myself first.
Yeah.
But right, you hopefully by seeing people stand up for what's wrong, that they will also jump on the bandwagon. And no, that's a good point.
And grow this community.
And grow this community. Yeah.
Yeah. Now this year the decision was made, and I didn't quite get who made the decision, who's making the arguments, that you would not risk arrest this year, and the reasons being what? Why not this year?
Okay. Well, first of all, I did ask that question. Who was the organizers?
Okay.
And six people who were here, where they were. It wasn't a nameless. I was under the impression it was nameless face somewhere, but it was not. It's one of us, all of us.
Well, the nature of Witness Against Torture is that everything is discussed, and things are out in the open.
Right. But this was made by a group of 6 that we will not risk arrest this time.
Right.
It wasn't made in a circle.
And it was more of a practical reason not to risk arrest.
More of a practical.
Because you just don't have enough people here to do all of the jobs that need to be done when someone gets arrested.
That's true. And
it's not just getting arrested. It's then a support that follows, and then the possible trial, then the cost of the trial, and whether or not that's really worth it.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I got.
That's correct. But also they said the group who was arrested, of the people who were arrested last time, no one was indigent, was not broke.
Yeah. Manijeh being one who I'd like to talk to, right?
Right. So when people can't afford a lawyer, then one's provided for them. That lawyer, the one person who's provided for, satisfies the lawyer to do whatever needs to get done.
Yeah. So if you can't afford it, then you don't want to risk arrest.
Well, it can be very expensive.
See, I also got the idea that that in being arrested, you want to try to affect the law. You want to try. Some want to actually go to trial and get some verdict that then is put down onto the books. I know that's a long process.
Well, some of the people I'm affiliated with, they always ask to go to trial. Always ask to go to trial.
In order to get a record of what it is, the goals are for what.
Exactly
right.
Most of the time, the prosecutor does not want to take them to trial, and they don't.
Right.
But my friend told me there were a couple of times that they went through the court, and they were sometimes they're found guilty, and sometimes they're found innocent. So.
And sometimes there's no finding at all. They just drop the case.
Well, if it goes to trial, then...
Oh, it's right. It goes to trial, of course.
But sometimes you're right. It's dropped. My last time I was arrested, they dropped charges before I even got...
Do you find that disappointing when the charges are dropped? Or is that okay, whew.
It's a relief. Really, it is a relief. Because I've been arrested in Vegas 3 times.
They like you in Vegas.
They like me a lot in Vegas. And so if they want me to come back... And my lawyer can't stand for me, then I have to plunk down another half a grand to go out to Las Vegas.
Wow.
So in that case, I'm glad I don't have to.
So these cases cost you some money.
It costs you money just to go. Just to go. There's the plane fare. Plus, you don't go out there on someone else's dime. You go out and donate to the stay, to the hotel, or not the hotel, but donate where you're staying for food or whatever.
Yeah, you got to live. Live while you're there, right? Protesters have to live along with everybody else. Yeah. So you disagree? That W.A.T should go ahead and risk arrest this time, because that's what they're about.
Yeah. No, I don't necessarily. I didn't disagree. I just want to know who the hell made that decision.
Okay.
But it's kind of sad that the man, the process, seems to have worn us down, because it does come down to money, and it's very expensive. And
talk about that. The process has worn you down, has worn maybe the group down.
Has worn all protesters down, I do believe. Because it used to be you could, when you went to the Nevada test site, which is you had a permit from the Shoshone Indian Nation that because they claim the test site is on their land.
Mm-hmm.
So they give you a permit, you're allowed to be on the land, on their land. So the authorities used to accept that. Once you crossed the line, they arrested you, they ran you through the process on site, and then they would say, if you don't hear from us, don't come back.
Mm-hmm. Well, we don't want to see you again.
Right. Exactly.
Stay out of town.
Stay out of town.
Right.
You did your thing, now go away.
Yeah.
Now, this last time, which I wasn't there, they arrested him, $250 bond. If you don't want to pay it or you don't have identification, we'll put you in jail. And they put some people in jail for 2 days.
Right.
So they're getting a little...
And this is a protest against nuclear armament.
Nuclear armament, right.
Right.
And the test site.
Right,
No.
right.
And you know, it worked. It worked over the years because now there's no longer a test period, alone in the atmosphere.
Right,
So
right.
It makes it.
So, I mean, there was an effect, but yet there's an effect on the system, but then there's an effect on the person who's an activist. I mean, because it's tiring, I imagine, to do this year after year.
What?
It's tiring.
Yeah, well, yeah. See, I got there I don't go out for I went out for the test site 2-3 years ago. But
Yeah.
now I've been going out for the drone. There's a drone base, a Creech Air Force Base.
The one replaces the other.
Yeah. Well, it's a never-ending battle, really,
Yeah.
when you get down to it.
Yeah.
There's, I say people feel like myself. I feel like I don't do enough. I don't think I'm never ever going to do enough. And there are people in this room who do far more than I do, and they feel the same way.
They just don't do enough.
I don't do enough. I can't. You can't. If you try to do everything that's out there, every wrong that's out there, you'll never get any sleep, and you'll never be home.
So, Don, let me ask you this. It's like you're not doing enough. You're doing a lot, but you're not doing enough, according to what you said. And there's people out there, I'm sure, have yelled at you and said, go away.
Yeah.
Get out of here. What are you doing here? We hate you.
Yeah.
I mean, to get that kind of, and then you feeling like, I'm doing good work.
Yeah.
They're not seeing it.
Yeah.
I mean, that must make you feel
Well, maybe
conflicted there.
Well, it kind of makes you. It kind of matters where you are. For instance, I've been to Kentucky a couple of times, protest against mountaintop mining. Now, if anybody knows anything about mountaintop mining, it's a very horrendous thing to do.
Yeah, it's a stripping of the earth.
Yeah, it's a
killing of the ground.
When they blow off that mountaintop, trees will never, ever grow there again because trees need dirt, and they fill it up with rocks. They fill up the hole with rocks. So a tree is never going to grow on that mountaintop again. How disgusting is that?
Yeah, so the coal industry, or whatever they're digging out, it's like they're gone, and the people are still there. They had a mountain, and now they don't anymore.
Yeah, here's what happened. When you go to Kentucky, we start out in the mountains. It seems like the whole system is against you. Go home, you don't live here, what are you, blah, blah, blah. But the closer you get down to the cities where the waste and the pollution from the coal mines is flowing, then you get support.
Yeah.
So it all depends where you're standing. But the thing about mountaintop mining, it takes about 4 or 5 people to do that. So one person makes $1 million, 4 people make a living until the coal is gone, and yet you leave all this pollution and crap behind.
And then you've got hundreds of thousands of people that are suffering.
Yeah, right. You got the whole state of Kentucky suffering, except for those few people that and actually not the whole state of Kentucky, the whole country. Because that waste goes down to the
Well, it gets into the
Mississippi.
environment and the greenhouse gas and all that stuff.
Which makes my argument, there's never enough things to do, right? We started out talking about W.A.T. We got a nuclear.
Yeah, we went from Guantanamo to nuclear to, was it the drones,
The drones,
and then the coal.
Mining.
Yeah, it goes on and on.
It goes on and on and on.
Well, you good people keep doing your good work. How are you? I haven't seen you in a year.
Oh, you know what? I have to tell you, people ask, how you doing? I say, I have the best life. Anyone ever hears me complaining, give me a swift kick in the ass, will you? Because I have a great life. There's no two ways about it.
Don Cunning, thank you very much for joining us once again on Barcrawl Radio.
Thanks for asking.
We're speaking now with Manijeh Saba, On March 27th, the U.S. District Court in 2019, Judge Robinson granted Manijeh a motion for a judgment of acquittal on the charge of illegally protesting on the steps of the Supreme Court on January 9th, 2019. And I was there. I was covering it for my barcrawlradio podcast. And all of you were so brave what you were doing up there. And I saw the police arrest you, and you went to you were taken back into a holding pen, and your clothes were taken away from you. I mean, there's the whole story. And then for months after that, there was a court hearing. In fact, I came to Washington to testify, and you collapsed. From the anxiety of it, or from the pressure of having to defend yourself, and you did defend yourself. And there's a lot written about this case, and it's an important case. But today I wanted to talk to you about Manijeh, as an activist, someone who has dedicated her life. We are both of some age, right? And you've dedicated this last part of your life to activism, and I wanted to find out why.
I was born in Iran in 1947, and at the age of in a military household, but only my father was the only military person. My mother was from a secular type of environment. She came.
So this was in the regime before,
under the Shah in 1947.
Yeah, there you go.
When the coup happened, 1947, and I was 6 years old when the coup happened, and I vividly remember that.
Wow.
Because in my family, my grandmother's house, they were burning books for 2 days, because they know the horrible time is coming. This was after the Mossadegh.
So what kind of books were they burning?
I think all of the progressives and leftist book and secular, all the activists, because I had uncles who were activists both in Mossadegh group and also to the party called Communist Party. And they were active. And I would remember that my mother has this white dove on her lapel, and she would say, "I'm going to meetings." And I thought meetings meaning walking in the street. I didn't know what it was, but I was hearing this. And as I have grown up and thought more about, and I think I became an advocate activist very early on in my life through all of the different experiences of mine. And I almost was been a rebel, very quiet rebel. Not like the way I am, very noisy rebel. And
can you remember an instance when you were young that which you rebelled against something?
One of the things that I was doing, for example, and I think my father, in some level, at some very weird level, has encouraged that, because we were in my family. We talked a lot, we communicated a lot, and my father. And the tradition, especially in my mother's family, that when you see grown-ups, you say hello, all the etiquette, and also kiss the person's hand. And
this would be boys or girls?
Boys or girls, women or men. No, these are young people older than me, us.
Yeah,
we
right.
would kiss their hands. And at one point, my father said to me, the only person who kissed their hand is your grandmother, meaning my mother's mother, that he respected incredibly. And she has had a lot of influence on me. And no one else. And that, I think, gave me courage to be different, not to go with everything that people ask me to do. And it came, and I was very vocal at college when I see something, a teacher is not good, and I would talk to other people, and I would walk into the president's office and say, what the hell is going on, and get people with me. Things like that. And nobody accepted me, somebody like me, who will always dressed up and made up and everything, behave like that. But if I saw something is wrong, I would voice it. And in my family, when they said, oh, you don't want to do this in public, my father would say, I don't want, whenever you leave this country, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. You can be naked, but here. And I said, why should we be lying? Why should I be pretending? I don't like pretense. And this is the thing that I came out of my household but I picked it up. So that has got me, and I was never active, politically active as it's known, while I was in Iran. I became very much concerned and active during revolution when I was here and I couldn't go home. And I have been...
You were a professor for a while.
We came to United States. We left Iran in 1974. We went to Montreal. We were there 3 years. And then we came to continue our graduate school work in the United States, especially because of my husband's field. And my field is political. I had a degree in Iran in nutrition, but I came to the United States and I joined the sociology, political sociology and development section of the Rutgers University that existed, that now does not exist. And also I studied women's studies at Rutgers. So, and then after that, during that time that I was in graduate school and all that, I was teaching and I was adjunct, basically, part-time lecturer and then adjunct at NYU and Rutgers and different places. But when I was at Rutgers, I was very active all the time about everything. I became politicized during Sabra and Shatila. Sabra and Shatila killing in Lebanon by Israelis. And that really was a huge light in my head went up, because usually in my family and environment that I was felt that Israeli government was right with whatever the hell they are doing. And then that actually brought me very close to supporting Palestinian and continued with Islamic revolution and everything else. So that's where I have been. But in terms of civil resistance that you have seen that I do, from 2000 I was saying that we need civil resistance, maybe, and I had in my head, maybe 1 minute every day or every week, everybody in the country stops wherever they are to think why we have to resist what's happening. This was during Bush administration. But I didn't know where to go, what to do, who to connect. Finally, in 2004, I heard, I think it's 2004, sometime in 2004, early 2005, that I heard that there is a mass demonstration and civil resistance, which many people call it civil disobedience, happening in Washington against the war. And I said, I'm going.
This is the war in Iraq.
It was war in Iraq. Yeah. And I was I was in New York before that, and I was actually active with groups around me against Afghanistan also. I didn't think that we should go to Afghanistan. And so I went. My husband came with me, and he was scared deadly. And I had no clue what I was getting into myself.
Were you scared?
No. I am very rarely scared, but just as a side, I have been scared in past 2 years, 3 years. And I tell you later on what it is if you want to know. But anyway, I went there, and a friend of mine was there also. He came, and they came and stood out in the street, holding sign and watching to see, well, how am I going to get arrested? We were there for the whole day, and I got arrested at 4 o'clock. I was
you have people that know you, that know who you are, and know that you're going to go over the edge. You're going to do something that's going to go beyond risking arrest.
Yes. And I risked arrest, and that was my first time, and I risked arrest, and I was in jail. Actually, this is something important that has left with me. At 1 o'clock in the morning, an officer who came to register me and do that, he said to me, when he realized I'm from Iran, he said, do you like that country? With a very sour face. I said, I love that country. Yeah. And he said, how about here? I looked at him and said, if I didn't love this country, I would be like all the other idiots in the mall, rather than be here. He looked at me and he walked away. And I got out and I came, and it was incredible. And I got to go to trial with 41 different other people. And I became witness actually in that. And that started my whole civil resistance that I think is one of the most important, especially to do at this time.
Let me ask you this, because I just heard earlier in around a meeting that you have in the morning here at the W.A.T events for this week. There's always that morning meeting in which the decision has been made to not risk arrest. And this risking arrest was actually, and getting arrested, was actually your beginning, what you said now, to your activism, to your deep level activism. Right. So what about now going out and not having that risking arrest as a potential outcome? Does that change what's going to happen today and tomorrow?
Yes. What happened last year actually in my trial, because I ended up being alone and I ended up being responsible for thousands of dollars of
out of your own pocket?
As out of my own pocket, but
right.
Some people have helped and give some money, but still is nothing. I have paid some of it, less than half of it myself now, but some people have given some money here and there, and I still owe a lot of money. But because of that, and because we didn't have a process to what like we did today, that you need to get arrested, we need to have training for people, and we have to do all of that. And if I didn't pay attention to it, that was not going on. And I have been doing this for a long time, but other people might be here who haven't, and they should not get this training and not information.
And we're talking about training of, not the training of being arrested, but you certainly have to be trained on how to be arrested, how to conduct yourself.
When you are risking, what does it mean? What does it take?
But then there's a whole group of people that need to support you.
Exactly.
Once you are arrested.
Yeah, when we are arrested, we get support, and people come and people greet us, no matter what it is. About 48 hours later, whatever it is, they are there in the middle of the night, and they take us to wherever we need to go and all that. So we didn't last time. We didn't go through the process, and we got arrested, and two of us ended up being charged, and I particularly got mistreated by the Superior Court Police, and my First Amendment.
Supreme Court Police.
Supreme Court Police,
right.
And my First Amendment was violated in so many different ways, which I am planning to file a lawsuit against them.
Good for you.
Try to find a group that I would do that. But anyway, so this
you're a warrior.
Listen, to me, if my government violates my First Amendment right, the Constitution that I always carry in my pocket, wherever I am, it's my red line. I have experienced two dictatorships, a theocracy and a military one. And it's very painful to me to know that I can afford it. I can afford to get arrested, go to jail, pay the fine, go back and forth to Washington, whatever it is, and manage it. I can maybe lose one week's of night food, dinner, but if who is able not to do it, who is going to do it? All the people who have children and work and everything else. I am retired. I'm going to be 73 in less than a month, and so I think it's my responsibility, and I have 3 grandchildren. It's my responsibility to my grandchildren to hold children of this world coming. It's really painful to me when I think about children and what's happening to them.
So now that we're not risking arrest, or you all, because I'm just watching.
Yeah.
I'm a witness to Witness
Yes.
Against Torture. This is going to change it's going to change the feeling of these actions now for you?
It does, no, but I go to other events that is not arrestable also.
Yeah.
But what it does actually to me tomorrow, especially tomorrow morning before the fire drill, I am going to risk arrest for fire drill, for the environment, because I think the environment and militarization and torture and everything are very closely connected.
Right. Say something about the fire drill.
Fire drill is for climate, for the emergency, incredible emergency, and Greta Thunberg told the world about it. And
the young girl.
She has been, she's 16 years old, that she was so outraged about the responsibility of the grown-ups, though she has taken and she has mobilized millions and millions of grown-ups and kids around the world, is tomorrow. And Jane Fonda has picked up on that, and for past, 17 weeks or something, every Friday has been a fire drill. And people have been risking arrest. Tomorrow, it's going to be a very heavy day because I'm planning to risk arrest with that because with the environment, because I have no religion. I started at the age of 14. I left religion, but environment is my religion. Human rights and environment is my religion, and I think these two are so connected. The war and environment and U.S. military is the largest pollution in the world,
Yep.
and the Guantanamo is part of that war, and environmental problem we have is part of it.
It's such a big thing. I love your idea of the 1 minute to resist, or 1 minute to think about.
To stand up, yeah.
Might be a great thing to kind of push.
Maybe we
push
can
forward.
organize that.
The 1 minute to resist.
Just stop.
Just 1 minute. Just stop
Just
for
one.
1 minute.
You are in a car, wherever you are, everybody stops, and everybody they have stuff to think about what the problem that we have to resolve.
There we go. There we go. Thank you very much, Manijeh Saba, for sitting down and talking to us. I've been wanting to do this for a while,
Thank you so much.
and we'll do it again.
It is such an honor to know
it's an
you
honor.
and be with you and be able to tell the stories
There's more.
and where we come and where we go.
There's many
Yeah.
stories, and it's my honor, totally,
You know,
to
it's
have you
just
sit here at our
so
table.
great to know
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're talking now with Marc Alvarado, a longtime member of Witness Against Torture, and one of the main organizers here. We spoke with you.
I don't know if I would.
No?
I don't
No?
know if I would say
I always
that.
thought you were kind of like a force here.
I think everybody
Last year
who's
you were.
here has different roles and whatnot. And
Yeah.
people will step in and out in terms of. Well, let's put it this way. I think one of the terms that my partner likes to use is that we're a leader-full organization.
Right. But yet you're
Right.
leaderful, but yet no one actually takes leadership in the sense that everyone can say what they want to say, and everyone can put their input in. It's very democratic.
It is.
It's one of the
It
most
is.
democratic organizations I've ever experienced, in the sense that everyone is respected, all ideas are respected, even if you disagree, and it's kind of like maybe getting under your skin a little bit. You try to kind of. That's what I saw. It's like you try to respect that other person, right?
Absolutely. It's we all try to share space.
Yep. To tell me, we talked last year a bit, and you were on my in our episode Barco Radio number 29, but I don't think I actually got into like who you are, where you come from, that sort of thing.
Sure. We talked about food.
We talked about food and how your partner took away your consciousness of food. You were breaking fast here at Witness Against Torture at the end of the week of protest, and you said, I'm going to really think about this food. I'm going to be conscious of my eating
absolutely.
of the food.
Oh, I love food.
I'm going to
I
be
love food, so I really want to be intentional.
I'm going to enjoy it and get the full thing, and then it didn't work out.
Well, my partner has a lot of food allergies,
Right.
So I will frequently.
All right, I'm going to address people to go to that podcast and get it, because it's a really cute story.
Oh, wonderful,
Yeah,
great.
yeah. It's episode 29 of Barcrow Radio. Marc, a little bit about you. Where are you from? What do you do?
Sure. Well, I guess currently I live in Cleveland. Cleveland is home now, Cleveland, Ohio, where I am a program associate and a full-time volunteer with the InterReligious Task Force on Central America and Columbia.
And what do they do?
This is a Latin American solidarity organization. Our work is primarily education, popular education.
Education about Colombia?
About Colombia and Central America. IRTF, the InterReligious Task Force, is one of the Central American solidarity organizations that sprung up in the 80s, when the I guess officially declared hostilities, the civil wars in Central America were taking place. By the end of the 80s, when those civil wars, when the official declared hostilities had ended, many of these solidarity organizations dissolved. IRTF stuck around. I think the decision was made to stick around because there was an understanding that repression does not stop.
No.
And we certainly know. I mean,
This
I
country
would
is,
imagine
is
that.
all about feeling it and doing it.
Oh yeah. Oh, and we're good at it.
Yeah.
We're great.
We've been good at it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
This America's great thing is, maybe we are great, but we're great at something. We're great at oppression.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good business for us.
Right.
So.
Right. So you've been working with this organization now for.
Just over 3 years.
Okay,
It's
good.
actually easy for me because I can always point at November 9th as my anniversary with IRTF.
Right.
My partner is a co-director of the InterReligious Task Force.
Oh, so you see each other all the time.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, we work together. She brought me on. We met when I was a full-time volunteer. I don't know how I got into this whole full-time volunteering thing, but
Yeah,
but at the
that's,
time,
that's anathema. The full-time volunteering. How does that work?
well,
out?
I mean, at the time, so this was the summer of 2016. I had recently moved back to Cleveland. I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas, but I had come to Cleveland in the
Alvarado, you're Mexican descent.
Yes.
Okay.
On my father's side, my father was in the Foreign Service back in the 60s, which took him around the world and eventually to Vietnam, where he met and married my mother. They married in Vietnam, and then he brought her back to.
Wow.
He brought her back to the United States. So I'm of Mexican and Vietnamese
I
descent.
see both in your face. I'm sure you've heard that before.
It gets well. I get a lot of what are you,
Uh-huh.
which
Yeah.
that is what it is.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice mix.
It works out for me. I'm happy with it.
I'm gonna take a picture just so.
Okay. I feel like I
Right,
should point
that's
out
what
if that picture is for the audience that I am not wearing a Border Patrol
I didn't even notice
shirt.
There it is, U.S. Border Patrol. I see it now.
But it's not Border. It's
Oh.
U.S. Murder Patrol.
Okay.
Yeah. A little takeoff on the Border Patrol logo there.
Right,
U.S.
little
Murder
irony there.
Patrol, because that's what they are. That's what they do. I
Which is
just want to
something
point
else
that.
that you're involved with, which is border conflict and protesting our policy at the border.
Well, as a man of partially of Mexican descent, and also as a volunteer with a Latin American solidarity organization, certainly border conflict is one of our issues that we are working on. Border conflict, not in the sense that there are skirmishes at the border, but it's really we're working to help people understand why there is an exodus from Central America, why so many people are being forced to flee from their homes, from their homelands, from their countries, to the United States, and they're being stopped at the border.
How did you get into activism? What was the first impulse? What was that said, it's like, this is what I want to spend my time doing? Something happened.
Okay, because there was throughout my life there have been a number of, I guess, impulses or whatnot. My father was my father worked in the nonprofit management sector. He was with the United Way for many years, and when he was no longer with the United Way, he still worked as a consultant, and it was. When he was alive, it was well known that, if you were in San Antonio and if you were trying to form an organization and you needed to put together a board and you needed to find funding and you wanted to help people, but you need to figure out how to get going. If you asked around long enough, eventually someone would say, "Oh, you want to talk to Richard Alvarado. He's the guy to help you out." So I think, from a young age, the idea of public service as being a good and worthy thing to do was instilled in me by both of my parents. My mother, having come over from Vietnam, and having had a rather difficult life.
Had she? Well, your mother, she would have been very young during the war.
Goodness. She, Yeah, she would have been in her 20s
Okay.
at the time.
During the Vietnam War.
Yes.
Right. So she has memories of it, clearly.
She does. She
Right.
does. Well, and her family was originally from the north of Vietnam, and they became refugees after the Viet Minh managed to chase the French out, but because Western hegemonic powers are what they are, the country was forced to split in half. And my mother's family actually became refugees from the north. They fled to South Vietnam for a number of reasons, and I won't get into all of that.
Sure. But that must have informed your own activism. I mean, did your mother get involved with that at all, with what your father was doing, or did she have her own?
Not so much, and actually, I wouldn't even say that either of my parents really worked as activists.
Mm-hmm.
They worked in social services. My father, in Vietnam, my father was in the Foreign Service. My mother was a social worker. That's how they met.
Right.
Doing social work together.
It seems to me there is a link between social work, that a social worker does in dealing with people on the ground with real problems, and what you do here at Witness Against Torture, or any of your activism, in that you're dealing with these men who are out there in Guantanamo, who are suffering. Isn't there some connection between this kind of human-to-human thing that a social worker has that maybe?
Well, I would say that the connection is simply about knowing, what is right, or knowing the connection is, as I see it, understanding that we each, as individuals, are members of community, and we have an obligation to our community and to the other members of our community, and this community is global.
It's just not me and my community. It's just not me and my neighborhood. My neighborhood is part of another bigger neighborhood.
Right. I don't know how to put it, and I want to be clear that in my time with the InterReligious Task Force, with IRTF Cleveland, I have come to understand that there's a dramatic difference between charity and solidarity, and much of the problems that we see, much of what we are fighting against, comes from this idea that we here in the United States, and in the most prosperous and powerful nation in the world.
I would say physically powerful. We're not powerful in a lot of different ways.
No, we're not. But physically, we have
fiscally.
Yes, yeah. We have power in the way that a bully has power, and we have weight to throw around. And unfortunately, that even in our good intentions, we still throw our weight around when we see ourselves as, the United States as the world's cop, or when.
What I love is that we call ourselves Americans, and we're the only Americans.
Right. We talked about this before, haven't we?
Chris Brandt and I have decided that word doesn't work anymore unless you're talking about I'm part of this continent, which is called the Americas. We're really Usians. And Usians kind of works
telling me
well
about that, yeah.
because we use people to get what we want.
We're good at it, yeah.
We're good at being Usians.
Yeah.
And anyway, so you're talking about community and the larger community, and also the fact that there's a one-on-one connection between people that may inform your activism. This community that you belong to here, this is a community of activists. What is your connection to them? What is your connection to Witness Against Torture, or to your community of that you work with in Cleveland?
Well, and I was getting on this story, well, didn't I? And then I went off on all these tangents, and I
No,
apologize.
that's all right. No. This is what I do.
Well, okay. If I can go back a little bit.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Go ahead.
So I mentioned my father's no longer with us. I was living in the Boston area for about a decade, and then in 2012, my father was sick. He was diagnosed with glioblastoma. He had a tumor on the left side of his brain, and I left Boston to go back to San Antonio, to Bexar County, where San Antonio is located, to be with my father in his last few months, and that was the summer and fall of 2012. So there was an election, or rather there were campaigns. It was election season. This was at the time Obama was running for his second term against Mitt Romney, and I spent these few months with my father on a farm that my family, that used to be in my family, in southwest Bexar County outside of San Antonio. And it was just the two of us, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, with not much to do. And we watched news all day long, every day. And at this time, I still considered myself something of a liberal. I would say that my views are certainly more radical now, and I've eschewed neoliberalism and all that goes with it, or at least I'm working to. But at the time, we spent a lot of time watching MSNBC.
Certainly not Fox.
No, certainly not Fox. But we spent a lot of time watching MSNBC with its, somewhat, sort of liberal bent. And, just watching the news all day, every day. And, having already had, some these values instilled by me, by my parents, that, it is good and it is worthy to work in service to your community, to your fellow human beings, wherever on this globe they may live. Just during that time, and I don't know exactly what it was, but the day my father died was the day of the inauguration.
My God.
So my father was able to vote. In his last election, we went to the polling place, and I was able to assist him. And at this time, he was having tremendous difficulties. The glioblastoma made movement on the right side of his body very difficult, and he had speech aphasia. So he knew what he wanted to say, but when it would travel from his brain to his mouth, it wasn't happening. And
he could have sent in an absentee ballot. No?
Oh, well, we voted early.
Okay.
We voted
but you went
early,
down
but
to the
not an
polling.
absentee ballot.
You went down to the polling place.
We went to the polling place. He was able to walk
Right.
some. In between radiation treatments,
There is something about going to the polling place that to me has a resonance that I don't think an absentee ballot would. But these two events happen the same day. I mean,
no. We voted.
No, I mean is his death and the inauguration.
Oh yes. I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have been totally split. I mean, could you pay attention to the inauguration at all?
Well, I did, because at this time, it was inevitable. My father had lapsed into an unresponsive state.
Yeah.
So he had been provided with a hospice bed, and with medication, basically to
Keep him.
ease his
Yeah.
transition. It was, I mean, we were ready. It was, it was going to be any day, any minute now. So I sat there in the living room watching the inauguration with my father with the volume way up, because I don't know what he took in. He may have been able to hear it.
You're trying to share this with him.
I tried, yeah.
You wanted to be with him during this wonderful moment.
I did.
Yeah.
Wonderful moment. I'm sorry. I want to make clear that now in my activism that I've been brought into movement work. I now consider all presidents to be criminals and whatnot, and I don't
Yeah.
and certainly I feel that our previous president was far better than what we have now, but I think it's important to know that every leader must be held to account, and they rarely are.
All right,
but that's me going off on a tangent.
Maybe
I
the
apologize.
wonderful moment is the moment of you sharing this with your father.
It was
This
it
connecting
was.
thing, which was kind of the theme I think we've been developing here. This
And,
idea of
and
connection.
we'd been looking to this moment for months, because as I mentioned,
Yeah.
my father, with all of his the difficulties that glioblastoma had, it was what we were doing for 6 months, just following different campaigns, following all the run up to the elections. So this was important for us, and it was important that I could, and I was grateful that I could share that moment with him. And when the inauguration was over, and Beyonce had sung her song, and I turned the TV off, and I don't know. Maybe it was because we had been aiming towards this moment for several months, but I went to my father and I got up real close to him, so that he could hear me if he was hearing anything. And I just wanted to assure him that, throughout my adult life, I had been, I wouldn't say aimless, but I never really established one career. I went to music school, and that's what brought me to Cleveland in the first place in the late 90s to attend conservatory there. Once upon a time, I wanted to be a classical violinist. That didn't work out. I mean, it's a very difficult field to get into, and I worked different jobs through the years.
And your father worried about that.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. So I wanted to assure him after the inauguration was over. Just something came over to me, and I went to his bedside and said something along the lines of, it's okay. I have an idea. I have a direction now. I'm going to work in public service. I'm going to follow in your footsteps some way. I'm not going to do the exact same thing that you did, but I understand that I've been given a lot in my life, and it's not as simple. It's not as simple, it's not as simple as just I want to give back. But somehow or another, I wanted my father to understand that I was going to pursue a life in service, and that I was going to be okay. He wouldn't have to worry about me, that I was going to figure something out.
And you have.
I think so. I hope. I think he heard that. I imagine that he did. After that, I went to the kitchen to do some dishes or whatnot. And at one point, I realized that it was hard to tell because he had his bed, and he had the various, machinery around his bed,
The oxygen
and with all the noise it was making. And I noticed that I wasn't hearing the oxygen quite the same way.
Yep.
And I went over, and that was it. He was gone.
Yeah. While you were doing the dishes.
At some point.
Yeah. Do you? Is this something that you carry with you now? Is
Yes. Yeah. I don't think of it all the time, because that was, that was 7 years ago now, right? That was January of 2013.
Mark, can I say you're a lucky guy?
I think so.
To have that experience
I think I am.
with your father?
Yeah.
Extremely, amazingly, I didn't have that with my father's death.
No, it was
But to have those, you had 7 months with him?
about
months?
6 months.
6 months, yeah.
Yeah.
You and him,
Just the two of us. It was, oh God, it was difficult.
I bet.
It was hard. I still see him sitting on the couch and moving in this extreme discomfort that he was in, and not being able to say what it was, but I think he was, I don't know, I think something was telling him to hold on. Maybe. Until maybe he just needed some assurance from me. And I don't know. I'd like to think that he was just waiting for me to, I don't know, give him permission to leave.
I think there's a truth to that. I think there's
Possibly.
a truth to that. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So moving on from that, I wasn't planning to stay in Texas. I ended up staying in Texas for about another year, helping out family with a couple of things. But I had in my mind that I was going to go, and I was going to find where, I was going to find my next home. So I inherited an '02 Honda Accord from my father, and I loaded all of my possessions into it, and I took off around the country for a few months to take the great road trip that I had never taken before. Because by this point I was in my mid-30s at this point, and I had been wanting to travel the country for a while, and so I did, with the idea that eventually I would find where I was going to live. But I ended up going back to Cleveland, which was kind of always at the top of my list. I had gone to school there, I'd lived there before, and also quite importantly, my brother lives in Cleveland.
Okay.
And when I was living in Boston, I would travel to Cleveland to visit my brother often. And so I went back to Cleveland, and I started looking for work, started trying to figure out what I was going to do. I hooked up with some street medics during the RNC, which took place in Cleveland. The Republican National Convention was in Cleveland.
Forgot about that totally.
So I got myself some street medic training, and during the RNC, I roamed the streets of downtown Cleveland with other street medics. Mostly reminding people to drink water and treating blisters and things like that. And after the RNC, my brother, who I suppose, took up my father's mantle of, okay, who's going to look after Mark, because we Mark's
This is your older brother.
This is my older brother.
Yeah.
Certainly, and certainly much more responsible. I was the artist, and I was the one who, kind of.
Yeah, but you're also the one who took care of your father in his last 6 months.
Well, because I was able to.
Yeah.
I wasn't leaving anything behind. My brother had established roots in Cleveland, and me with my musician's heart, I was still wandering in a sense. Even in one place, I was still all over the place. So there wasn't much for me to leave behind. And it was actually, I went back to San Antonio because I was talking with my brother on the phone, and he was talking about taking job interviews. He works in community development in Cleveland, in a city where that kind of work is very important.
Yeah, you're all kind of in this same field. I mean, as far as social work, community development.
I've had a lot of good examples.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of good examples to follow,
Yeah.
Including that of my partner, who brought me into the movement, really. So I beg your pardon, Alan, finally getting to your question.
I think you've been answering it all along.
My brother turned me on to, there was a workshop being provided, or rather there was a call for organizers for a presidential campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And at this time, both the Republican and Democratic national conventions were over. So there were only two major party candidates at the time. So I went to see if I could get some work as an organizer, but I didn't have enough experience. But I was asked if I was willing to volunteer, and so I did. So I became a volunteer fellow with, well, not the Trump campaign. We'll say that much.
I didn't think so. No.
So, yeah, roughly 7 days a week from like 9 in the morning till 10, 11 at night. I was following around, paid organizing staff and training to organize. And that was really why I got into this campaign. Like a lot of people, I couldn't conceive of the idea that Trump would actually win this election. So for me, I joined this campaign for experience.
Right.
I was not a true believer.
It wasn't going to make any difference. You just wanted to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't going to be elected.
Well, I didn't think so. So.
None of us did.
And I understood that, Cleveland was a very important place for this election. Ohio's, always, like they say, a battleground state.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it was certainly important to, when you consider the demographics of Ohio, and you consider that Cleveland has, that in a state that is, I want to say, almost 90% white, and I beg pardon for using the word white. I mean, I think of whiteness as a social construct. And I think that's something that a lot of people that and that understanding is is in the national is in our societal discourse now, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, we need to continue seeing this as a narrative.
Yeah,
white as a story.
But in a state that is heavily white, Cleveland is a city that is majority people of color, and African descendant. And so it was certainly important to turn out numbers, as many voters as we could in Cleveland, to try and sway the state. Of course, we know that we were ultimately unsuccessful. But for me, I didn't have any tremendous ideological affinity with the candidate that I was supporting. My idea was, I'm going to get experience.
Yep.
And after this election is over, I know how the election's going to turn out. That was that was how I felt at the time. I am going to find work as an organizer here in Cleveland, and I'm going to work to hold my new president's feet to the fire, because every leaders need to be held accountable, and they never are, and we're certainly seeing that now. There's no real accountability for our leaders. And then November 8th turned out the way that it did. And the next morning,
Is that when you turned from liberalism to to more extreme activism?
Well, that started it.
Yeah.
I would say. Well, it was happening while I was volunteering with this campaign. Is when I met my partner, who, as I mentioned, is co-director of the InterReligious Task Force
can
of
name
Central
her.
America. Can't wait. Okay, Chrissy Stonebraker-Martinez,
There we go.
co-director. And if I may, you can find out more about us at irtfcleveland.org.
IRTFCleveland.org. Okay.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah. So the morning after the election, Chrissy is. I'm having myself a little cry. I'll be honest.
A lot of us did.
Sure. And Chrissy, who at the time, and she was already teaching me a lot even before I was brought into the movement. When we met, she would say that, it's good that you're, volunteering with this campaign. But it was kind of a, oh, that's cute. Everybody's got to do that once. I've come to understand that, I'll put it this way. She would say to me that, she doesn't work on candidate campaigns anymore. She works on issues.
Mm-hmm.
Because the issue will not let you down.
I think that's very wise. Yeah, I think a lot of people are approaching it that way. We've had many programs on issues.
I always
Gun
say
issues
that.
or whatever.
Yeah. No, and there was a great deal of wisdom there that Chrissy imparted on me, and I always say that my real education started at the age of 38, when I started getting involved, and when the morning after the November 8th election, Chrissy's saying to me, "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm okay. I'm fine." Having a little sniff, She's like, "Well, you want to come to the office today? Come have lunch with the rest of the staff and whatnot, and maybe just try and decompress with everyone, and and process what's going on." Yeah, I'd like to come in and do that. I'd like to do that. She said, maybe, I don't know, maybe if you think like you can, if you're willing to continue volunteering for a while, maybe you'd like to volunteer with IRTF. Yeah, I think I'd like to do that. As I'm looking down at the ground and trying to hold back tears. Well, I'll come volunteer with IRTF. I'd like to do that. Okay,
Doing something is one of the cures.
Yeah.
Of that kind of trauma.
Yeah, no,
This was a traumatic
thing.
thing.
I needed it. I really did, and so. So that was just over 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was November 9th.
So that was a big change.
It was.
I mean, these were two big events in your life. The one when inauguration and your father's passing, and then this coming in of a new Trumpish era that kind of sent you on your way.
Yeah.
To what you're doing now, which is going 3 years or so ago.
I always say it's ironic because I in my organizing, in my activism work, I take great pains to say that this work does not end when the Trump regime is over.
Oh no. No, he's just showing us who we are.
Yeah, and that's just it, and
he's made it
in
very
a sense,
clear, and thank you very much, sir, for showing us that. Because now maybe we can do something about it.
And isn't that strange
Yeah.
to have I wouldn't say that I have gratitude, but I do say how weird it is that I
Maybe
think
gratitude,
Trump
but we
has
could-
actually helped the movement.
We could take an advantage. We could take advantage of we all could take advantage of learning who we are.
Yeah.
Because until you learn who you are, you can't become something better. And
Well,
I think that's the hope that I can bring out of this Trump era.
Well, and it's certainly a very important thing. I mean, certainly, in a broader societal perspective, I like to say that the iron is hot, and this is, well, I've been saying it for 3 years now. This is that catastrophe that we can't let go to waste.
What do you think? Marc Alvarado, thank you very much for sharing so much.
Alan, thank you so much for having me.
with
I appreciate
with
it.
us. Yeah, it's been great, and keep carrying on the good work, you U.S. murder patrol guy.
Well, and if I may, I want to thank you for this platform, and I want to thank your listeners And I want to say to all of you, who are listening, don't give up. Don't give up. If I may say one thing really quickly, and this is something I learned, the first fast that I attended with Witness Against Torture, shortly after Chrissy brought me into IRTF, it was November of 2016. In January of 2017, I came to DC for, because IRTF has long, brought people from Cleveland to participate with Witness Against Torture in the fast. So during my first fast there, and this, January 2017, this is the month of the inauguration, and so much is happening, and and people are really starting to get mobilized. A lot of people. I was part of this wave of people really getting mobilized for the first time. And I remember after one demonstration at the Pentagon, where we really didn't seem to get much of a response. Afterwards, I asked, one of the veterans of this movement, Cheryl Hogue. I'm pretty sure it was Cheryl I was asking.
Who's with us today?
And I think she said this is her 13th year.
I think
with
so.
Witness Against Torture. I remember going up to her and saying, Cheryl, I wouldn't say that I'm conflicted, because I believe in the movement. I believe in this work. I really want to help. I want to be a part of it. But what were we doing just there? I mean, we're demonstrating in front of the Pentagon, and most people who are walking by are, actively not looking at us. I remember one guy giving us a thumbs up, and I remember more people just kind of sneering at us and, oh, liberals, what are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. And really not getting a response. And there was no press, there was no media there at the time, because this was part of a regular demonstration at the Pentagon. And I thought, what did we just do? What's the result? What action? What consequence did our little outcome. What difference did we make just now? And I remember Cheryl saying to me, Mark, if nothing else, we're building community. And if that's the only thing that we're doing, it's still important, it's still worthwhile. And so and now, having been in this work for, a little over 3 years, with all the wisdom that I've, as still a young pup in the movement, I feel like, but, I've been at it for,
you understood what
now.
she said.
I did. And I say that to people now when people are new, when I meet someone at a rally or something, when young people, students get involved, with work at IRTF, we have a lot, we bring people in as interns, and we try to foster youth leadership. And whenever I see someone get a little discouraged, and whenever someone is at a demonstration or at a rally with me, and they start to really get down, because there's always going to be the naysayers and the hecklers who come around and who say that, what you're doing makes no difference. You're not doing anything. You're pushing back against something that just is. War just is.
So
this
get
is how it's
over
been.
it.
Yeah, exactly right. Get over
it.
Or that line, or the line from the Peter, Paul, and Mary, the Great Mandala. It's been going on for 10,000 years.
Yeah,
Take your place on the Great Mandala.
Yeah.
But I always remember, what I was told, and I always make a point to say, we are building community, and every time we do this community is getting larger, and we are building people power. And it's, as long as we keep doing that, it's only a matter of time before this community becomes the beloved community that we are trying to bring about.
And I'm going to try to bring this full circle here, is that this community was being built by your father and by your mother and probably the people before them, this idea of community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you actually bringing that up, because people always say to those of us who are visible, publicly visible in this kind of work, people always say, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your work. And I always push back against it and say, no, we're all in this together. We are building this together. We are building this community. There are no pedestals here. You can put leaders on pedestals and they'll be taken down. And the movement goes on. We're not trying to boost leaders here. We're trying to boost the people. We're trying to encourage, as Chrissy likes to say, leaderful movements. We are all leaders in this. We are all workers.
We're all leaders, we're all followers, we're all workers. We're all human beings.
We're all community.
This is Alan Winston, this is Barcrawl Radio, and this is a Barcrawl Radio kind of an extra because we're back in the Witness Against Torture events here in Washington, D.C., and I'm sitting now with Chrissy Stonebraker-Martinez. I didn't get to talk to you last year, and this year I'm trying to get people that I hadn't talked to, and I talked to your partner, Marc Alvarado. He told us about his last breaking of the fast last year.
Yeah.
And how you messed up his plans. And you don't know about that, but you do know about it because you wanted to be so focused on tasting the food and you kind of like mucked it up.
Well, I have a lot of allergies. So I asked if I had...
Well, that's not his problem.
I asked if
maybe it is.
There was something, if he could taste one of my allergies
Yeah.
in the food.
Right.
And I didn't mean for it to be the first bite that he took.
And he forgot that he wanted to be conscious of that first bite. So we're saying this year, when you break fast tomorrow, maybe
I won't
you
interrupt
can
him.
leave him alone. Say, Mark, I want you to pay attention.
Yeah, savor.
And then I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Taste this. Is it okay? Is it okay? Chrissy, tell us about yourself. Maybe Stonebraker-Martinez.
Yeah, it's a great name.
Yeah.
Most badass name ever. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, no. This is my own podcast. You can say whatever you want.
Stonebraker-Martinez. Stonebreaker is Appalachian, originally from Germany. And Martinez is Colombian in my case, and in the tradition of other Colombians and other Latinx folks. One way that we resist patriarchy, though it's not perfect because it's still patriarchal, is by taking both of our parents' paternal names. So my parents are Appalachian and Colombian, and other things a little bit, but yeah.
You got Stonebraker-Martinez, and clearly you use that as your professional name. You're co-director of the InterReligious Task Force on Central America and Columbia.
I am.
Yeah. Tell us about that work that you do. Mark told us a little bit, but what is your take on it?
Yeah.
This is in Cleveland.
We are based in Cleveland. We are an international grassroots solidarity organization working on human rights issues that focus on Central America and Colombia and Mexico as well. And we've been around since 1980. So in 1980, there were two women from Cleveland who were, and a lot of the work that I do is actually really, really painful. So I always want to give that caveat before I start my conversations because it can be really hard and traumatizing for people. But two women from Cleveland and two women from New York were raped and murdered in El Salvador in 1980. And so Clevelanders of faith and conscience who had already been working on Chilean and Nicaraguan refugee issues came together to resist the killing of these women. And unfortunately, we knew that the U.S. was involved in training and funding the people who ultimately were charged with the crimes of killing these women, as well as many, many, many massacres in El Salvador. About 75,000 people were murdered in a 12-year civil war there, and that included the majority of the country's remaining indigenous populations. And so these were white, well-educated, upper-middle-class women from the U.S. and from the Catholic religion, and so their pictures were on the front page of every paper in the U.S. And that's a hard thing for us to be honest about because it's not hard to be honest about it. It's a hard thing for us to accept, is the fact that they were there originally doing charity work and doing work for the church, and the church has done horrible things in the world.
But not this time.
But not this time. They were writing to President Carter asking about that. Jean Donovan, her father was a military contractor, and the story goes that he was a military contractor in Connecticut and working on helicopters, and she saw helicopters that she knew he was helping to engineer, flying over her head, only made for U.S. military contracts. And ultimately, the Truth Commission agreed that, yes, the U.S. trained and funded the people who committed war crimes and crimes against humanity during the Civil War in El Salvador, and really helped to fund the Civil War in El Salvador. And so their work changed from charity work to solidarity work when, after the assassination of Archbishop, now Saint Oscar Romero.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, their family, he died 9 months before they were murdered, and their families and friends asked them to leave El Salvador because it was getting so dangerous, and they said, no, we would be abusing our privilege if we were to leave these children behind, or these people behind, these villagers behind, and they couldn't leave the violence with us. So we're not going anywhere until they're safe. And they ultimately sacrificed their life for that.
Yeah.
And we're really grateful that that despite their identity, they did offer us some wonderful examples of what it means to be in solidarity, what it means to give up your privilege, or to put your privilege on the line for something, and what it means to use your privilege to offer safety to others, but also what it means to be just in relationship with someone. And they learned that from the Salvadoran people themselves. So,
what it means to be in relationship with someone. Can we unpack that a little bit? Because I have a relationship with my wife, you have a relationship with Marc. Is that the kind of relationship we're talking about?
I think that's one type of relationship.
Yeah.
But to be in relationship with other people means to honor and acknowledge and see each other's humanity. And otherwise, it's an imbalanced relationship or an oppressive relationship if we're not, if there's not equity, and if there's not an equal acknowledgement of power in any relationship. That can be an individual, or that can be our relationships with our government, our relationships with people who hold power over us.
That's very interesting. The recognition of both sides of the partnership, whether it's a person to person, or it's a community to another community, or a community to a state government, or a family. I mean, all those are partnerships. And if one side doesn't recognize the rights of the other side in a kind of a loving way, or the way that Romero was talking about.
In solidarity
with, in other words, we're in this together. You're not going to have good outcomes.
Yeah. And the reason why I came to this work is because of my Colombian family. So I was primarily raised by that side of my family in many ways. My parents are still together, but my father, both my parents were laborers, and they are now both disabled. And
not from their labor.
Partly from their labor, yeah. And
but not getting compensation for it.
No.
Yeah.
Right. And my father worked second shift at a steel mill when I was growing up. I grew up in the Rust Belt in Youngstown, Ohio.
Oh, wow.
And everyone says
that
to me.
Some stuff. Yeah, well, because Youngstown, I mean, our great leader has made certain promises to the steel industry.
That
Youngstown
he has
is right
failed.
in the center of it.
Yes, that he has failed, and that I am trying very hard to get people in the Rust Belt to see how many of those failed promises are
Why is it so
happening.
hard? It's like we're going all over the place, and I'll try to bring it all back. But why do you think it's so hard? You know the people in the Rust Belt. You grew up there. Why is it so hard for them to see that this man does not have their best interest in mind.
Well, let's go back a little bit, and that maybe we can get there. So my father worked second shift, and that was the only way that he could provide for his family. And so I only saw him on Sundays when I was between the age of 5 and 17. So even though we were living in the same house, we literally never saw each other except for one day a week, as if I was being raised by my mother. And my mom is one of 15, and so she has 6 and 11 of her and her siblings made it to adulthood, and 9 of them are living today. And she has 6 sisters. It's amazing. And those women really raised me, and the Colombian struggle is really why I'm in the movement today. And that also really informs my experience in Youngstown and my experience in Cleveland and in the Rust Belt more broadly, because I see myself and I have experienced myself as an outsider. I'm a first generation U.S. American, knowing that all people from the hemisphere are American. I'm a first generation college student. Only out of all of my parents and grandparents, only one had a high school diploma. And so I didn't have the typical experience, I think, that other people had in my community as I was growing up. And I saw a lot of personal prejudice because of that, and also a lot of extreme prejudice against my mother because of that. And so I do know these people, but I also have never felt like I quite fit into this place. Let's talk about Youngstown. Youngstown has this amazing Union history. In 1937, 20,000 people walked off the job to protest their treatment in the steel mills.
In solidarity.
It's so beautiful. And over the decades, that labor movement has totally been dismantled in many ways, partly because of corruption, partly because of the design of systems of oppression, partly also because of privilege, right? As people gained wealth, as they gained power, they abandoned the solidarity that got them to access that wealth and power.
But also the wealth actually left Youngstown, too.
It also did. Yeah, it's a post-industrial place, right?
Right.
We're living in a post-industrial society. And the height of, the solidarity movement, the labor movement in Youngstown was really left too with that disinvestment or that de-investment in the area and in industrial.
But you say you want to
economy
talk
there.
to these people and you want to make them woke.
Well, I didn't say that, though.
Oh, okay.
Though that wouldn't be terrible.
Yeah.
I feel it's my responsibility. I feel I offer a unique perspective there. It's hard to live in the Rust Belt. It's really hard. It's hard to live in Ohio right now. It's hard to live in a lot of of states with more conservative legislatures. Even our quote unquote progressive, though they're not, politicians and government officials really don't have the interests of the people. That's been my experience in my state. And so I feel it's my responsibility and the responsibility of other people who are from a certain place to recognize where they're from and to know themselves. And that's why I'm really living in the best of both worlds, because I'm working in the Rust Belt,
In Cleveland, Ohio.
on issues as well, back home in my homeland in my motherland, right? Of Columbia. So it's the best of both worlds for me.
You're bringing the two together.
Bringing the two together.
The idea of community and actually the two communities.
Right. And this is something that a lot of migrant children experience. Seeing the suffering of my mother and her family being so far away from their networks of support, from the people that loved them and raised them, was very, very challenging and contributed to, as did many other factors, one being economic, but to their mental health and well-being. And a lot of migrant children end up staying within 100 miles of their parents because of the suffering that migration sometimes causes by being severed off from your community. So,
And that's their community, and they couldn't find it other places Well, that actually, and Colombia is not their community either.
Not anymore. No, that's it. It's a common phrase. Is like neither here nor there. In Latinx culture, but also in other migrant cultures. And a lot of my friends who I also identify like myself as displaced indigenous peoples and or first generation or migrant or Latinx or whatever, we say now that we are from both instead of from neither. We are full human beings, right? And if we want to have relationships that recognize our full humanity, we also have to recognize our own full humanity and know really ourselves. And so because I'm a full human being, I know that I am completely of the Rust Belt and also completely of Colombia and of the Embera lands in Colombia and of the peoples there. And I know what it means to honor the land in each place in a way that that protects it and that supports its growth. And yeah.
I mean, you're talking kind of a unity of community, and from two different communities, and so we have a regional kind of community that you're kind of bringing together from the north and from the south. You also have a generational connection that you have, in which the way that people are brought up and are migrated to places that are strange, and they have to kind of stay there. And you're now reaching back to the community of your inheritance, right? But you're also of a woman community. You're
a femme community.
You're from a femme community. I mean, you said your mother
and
had
a queer
6 sisters.
And
There's all kinds of communities. Let's talk about the woman's community.
Sure.
The woman's voice in Cleveland, Youngstown. How does that resonate? Is your organization InterReligious Task Force in Central America and Columbia? I'll say it again because I think people should know about
IRTF Cleveland.
IRTF, okay. Is it a female voice?
Well, I think it's a voice.
Because it started with protest against female death.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
And female protesters.
I think in many ways, well, it's an inclusive community. It's a really inclusive community. I'm the co-executive director of the organization, and my co-director identifies as a male. So we are balanced in that regard, I would say. But
that's an interesting idea. So he's a male. He switched. I forget the word to use to say. So but he was at one time coming out of a woman's experience, maybe, and maybe that's too difficult to even
no,
unpack.
Actually, he identifies as a male. Was assigned male at birth. My co-director, but myself, I identify as non-binary or gender non-conforming, and so the idea of womanhood is a tricky one for me. It's one that I honor and respect, but also one that, because of the age and time that I'm living, I can explore what it means also to have internalized masculinity, and also to really try to understand the balance of how I live my life and what exists within me and what exists within my soul. But anyway, so these women were really the impetus for our founding in many ways, and many religious women of faith were part of our founding and continue to be in part of our leadership. We've always skewed toward heavy female or gender nonconforming leadership. That's true, and it's and that voice, and I think the power of creative life, right? So people with uteruses are people who birth things and they bring life into the world. That is very much present in all that we do.
We've been talking about IRTF. Why don't you give us an example of what you do?
Yeah, so we primarily organize people to join the movement and recognize their place in society and understand themselves. We're a solidarity-based organization. We're a grassroots organization, and our primary goal is to get people to be part of this work for the long haul, to recognize that quote unquote helping people needs to start with understanding yourself so that you're not doing harm because you don't know yourself when you're helping others. And we take on 72 urgent human rights cases every year in Mexico, Central America, and Colombia. And those cases of advocacy are political, physical, psychosocial support for civilians who've been targeted in some way, oftentimes teachers, preachers, environmental defenders, journalists, etc. Women who've been criminalized for having miscarriages. All sorts of people are part of those cases. But we take on 72 urgent human rights cases every year, and that work really informs all of our education and advocacy and what we decide to organize around. But those cases are really emblematic of the societal ills that are happening, and those cases can really be connected to societal ills in other places, right? If you look at economic justice, environmental justice, racial justice, gender and sexual minority justice, and anti-militarism in any place in the world, we know that you're going to see what the human rights context is. And so our advocacy happens with Ohio senators and congresspersons. It happens with the United Nations. A partner organization of ours, the Fellowship of Reconciliation, has graciously appointed me as one of their United Nations representatives to New York, and so I'm able to leverage that relationship and make it possible to share more and more stories of the people on the ground who are human rights defenders, and to more broadly get these campaigns out and about. But we're just doing really broad advocacy in the UN, in Congress, in the Inter-American Human Rights Court, even the Organization of American States, just trying to make sure that people know the stories of struggle and resistance, and also that the people who are putting themselves on the line or who have been forced to put themselves on the line because they're indigenous or because they're Afro-descendant or because they happen to live on some very resource-rich land or whatever, that they are protected. And so we partner with unarmed civilian protection organizations, of which there are only 42 we know about in the entire world.
Unarmed civilian population. What
Unarmed civilian protection.
I feel like I'm one of those, but
yeah, you are.
I'm unarmed.
Absolutely. So people who accompany other folks in times of struggle. So we accompany them physically by literally being present physically. We accompany them psychosocially and spiritually by making it a priority to have dialogue and to check in with each other in relationship. And we also do that politically as well. I said physically, psychosocially, politically as well with when people are being persecuted. But so unarmed civilian protection is just like it sounds. People who are unarmed, who are there to document and witness. It's like human rights fact-finding. It's we might accompany a UN team. We might accompany another supranational organization or NGO to make sure that journalists and other media outlets know about conflicts that are happening, because when the international community has their eyes on a situation, then people are less likely to do corrupt things.
Sounds like you're a shield.
A shield in many ways, but we're doing this just because of the power of coalition and the power of relationship. It's not because we're international people that there's protection offered, because we do accompaniment with nationals and internationals at all times in every place that we go.
We've been talking very kind of, in a way, abstractly.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you come up with a concrete example
Sure.
of something you've done that you're proud of?
Oh, yeah.
And you have to name names, just...
Yeah, there are a few. One story I have is there's this friend we have named Moncho. He lives in the Magdalena Medio region of Colombia. He is accompanied by an organization that we partner with very deeply, Christian peacemaker teams. And Moncho's a human rights defender, and he has gone into an indigenous cooperative mining community in this region to support those people and their livelihood. And the way that they mine is an artisanal form of mining that doesn't destroy the mountain. And that was a hard thing for me to accept, because I'm like, oh no, I'm against mining of all kinds, until you realize, okay, well, if I'm not willing to give up these resources, using these resources, then we need to find more ethical ways to obtain them,
rather
right?
than blowing the top off a mountain.
Just like mountaintop removal happens in Appalachia, in West Virginia. It also happens all over the world. And so we go to accompany Moncho, and he accompanies this mining community who has a hard time obtaining permits from the Colombian government, because Canadian and U.S. mining corporations, and a few other countries as well, but in this case, Canadian and U.S. mining corporations are making it impossible for artisanal indigenous peoples to obtain a mining permit, because they're those mining companies are working with the government under free trade agreements. And what these mining companies do is they'll come in and they will bring in a workforce. So the people who are getting paid for the work are mostly not local people. So we're extracting wealth from a place, and we're all not even giving the labor back to the local community. And those people will often assault or harass the local populations and commit grave acts of violence that they know that they'll get away with because of impunity on the populations. And then when they've used up all the resources, or when they've detonated the mountain completely and there's carcinogenic chemicals going into the water stream,
And will
then
continue
they leave
to go in for many
years, right? That, like in the case of El Salvador, 97% of the water is not potable because it has cyanide in it from mining. And the people of El Salvador got so fed up with that they tried to ban mining, and they succeeded. And then they had to deal with, luckily they won, but they had to deal with a CAFTA infringement lawsuit where the government of El Salvador was being charged with an infringement of a free trade agreement because they wouldn't let an outside mining company come in and continue to poison their water sources. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so back to Moncho in Colombia. So we accompany these people who are doing great work, and the way that they honor these resources is so beautiful. And Moncho's house has been destroyed by fire more than once. He's been the victim of arson multiple times. And Moncho has been targeted by paramilitary and military forces in Colombia as he accompanies people. There was a paramilitary member who came around asking for him by his full legal name, and no one knew that name. And so luckily he was spared that day, but we were accompanying Moncho just literally to hear his story and to make sure that in this time of threat, where he was continued threats on his life, continued threats of arson against his family, that we could be with him physically, spiritually, psychosocially, politically. And we have people who regularly accompany the same folks, right? So that people who are there to enact violence or corruption, that they don't know when an accompanier is going to be there. So it offers an extra level of protection, because unfortunately we can't offer 24/7 protection right now.
Right.
But
they don't know when you're going to be there.
They don't know when we're going to be there, so they know that because he has these connections, right, to this coalition,
That he's not alone.
And that if something happens to him, that his story will not go unreported, or that
Because you document everything.
Because we document things, and there will be some level of justice, because we're going to seek that for anyone who we choose to accompany. Another story I really wanted to share very briefly is I've accompanied women in the federal prison in El Salvador. There are more than 150 women who have been charged with abortion or homicide for having pregnancy complications, the majority of which only had complications and never attempted an abortion.
You mean the pregnant woman is accused of homicide
because
the baby doesn't go to term?
Yes, absolutely. And there are women who've been charged 10 to 50 years in prison. There are women, mostly indigenous and rural women, right? Because of their poverty, because they're in more remote places. If they call an ambulance or someone to come and help them, and they don't get there in time, or they ignore their call or whatever because of their remote location, then the law enforcement officer wants to make sure that they're not in trouble for mishandling this situation, right? That they're not going to be the one that is charged with endangerment. So these women will wake up from miscarriages with shackles. They will wake up in prison. They will wake up in the hospital. They'll wake up, and some of these women, their babies survived these pregnancy complications, and they're still in prison with attempted abortion, which is disgusting because now their children are being left to be raised without them. It's a horrible situation, and as reproductive rights become more criminalized in the United States, we know that this is an important form of cross solidarity. That in my own state, in Ohio, we've attempted a 6-week abortion ban, and that is trying to make it to the Supreme Court right now. But in Alabama, in several other states, this is happening as well, where more and more people are being criminalized. People with uteruses are being criminalized for simply, choosing bodily autonomy. So we've accompanied these women in prison, and to hear their stories, to walk with them as they get college degrees, as they are released in prison sometimes, as they're released from prison and they go on to do work to support the other people that they were imprisoned with. It's just amazing. And we work with the Centro de Intercambio y Solidaridad in El Salvador, and they have worked with the women in prison for these cases for many years, and we're just really grateful to be in relationship with them, to support their work, and to share the similarities between the two places so that we can understand better how to dismantle this oppression that's coming at all of us all over the world from all different sides, because it's similar, because the root causes are the same causes.
And it's the root, and I think that's how we began this conversation of this disconnect. It must be exhausting spiritually, physically,
I laugh so I don't cry.
Relationship-wise, to do this kind of work and to face these kinds of problems, and that is your work.
Yes.
And now you're here with Witness Against Torture,
talking about
which is another
suffering.
Exhausting, important,
Yes.
heavy load that's being carried by very few people.
It is. It's true. Strong, small, but mighty.
How do you do that?
That's a great question. I wasn't totally prepared. Unfortunately, we all. Someone said today, you're not born into the movement, you join the movement. But I often say I was born into the movement because of my identity. I was automatically set up for a certain type of persecution, right? Because I have a uterus, because I'm first generation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You're from a mixed family.
Because I have a mixed status family, for instance. Because my family is multi, whatever. I always said that I was born into this, that I had no choice, that I am part of the movement because my life depends on it, my liberation, my freedom depends on it. But that does not prepare you for the amount of suffering, really, that you start to see when you do this work. And you really, really, really need to have great people checking in with you, supporting you. You can't do it alone. You can never be egotistical enough to think that you can survive this work by yourself, because you won't.
And thus the community of activists.
Thus that community. I mean, I need tools of healing, right? I need a path toward liberation. And so I need to create space and time for joy. I need to share joy. As Adrienne Marie Brown says, creating joy is following what emerges that is life-giving. And if you think about Gandhi, and although imperfect, many other people are, we're all flawed humans. He taught us so much about what it means to create constructive program or to nourish life-giving things, right? So I need to create joy. That's why there's so much art and song in our movements, right?
In Witness Against Torture.
In Witness Against Torture, with the peace poets, in the migrant rights movement, in the indigenous rights movement, we are rooted in song, and we have to create this joy, but we also have to check in with each other. We need to make sure that we are getting appropriate mental health care and physical health care. And that's really unfortunate. One thing that's really unfortunate is that a lot of activists don't have health care
and therefore don't have therapy.
Because they are piecing together, and lots of gig people do this too, journalists, artists, etc. They might not call themselves activists, but they're piecing together their bread and butter, but they're not then supported with healthcare. That's why I believe in healthcare for all, and that's why I'm going to be supporting Bernie. I know that no politician will save me, but I appreciate that his campaign is about the movement and not about himself. Checking in about your well-being is really important, and not letting things go. We can't normalize things, right? So I've been very fortunate in my work to have the support of my board to look for the similarities between conflict in the Middle East and conflict in Central and South America. And my partner does similar work, making the comparisons between Southeast Asia and Central America. And in going to Palestine to accompany people with Eyewitness Palestine or with Tree of Life or with Fellowship of Reconciliation or Christian Peacemaker Teams or whoever, experiencing being strip searched in that environment cannot be normalized, no matter how many of my friends experience that on a daily basis because they are living through occupation. So when someone dies, who we accompany, when someone is assassinated, who we accompany, we really have to honor.
This has happened to you? Someone that you've been accompanying has been assassinated?
Not while we are accompanying them.
I know, but who you have been.
But who we are accompanying, not like literally at that same moment, right?
I get it.
But we are in partnership with, who are accompanying, and then they are assassinated. We have to recognize every single life as valuable in that way. We have to honor it and take time to mourn and grieve. We can't just keep going business as usual. We really need to pace ourselves because this is a marathon and not a sprint, right? We need to make sure that we don't normalize violence. And that is one way that I think that you survive by doing this work.
Yeah. A marathon, though, is won by some one person. This is a marathon that needs to be run by everybody.
It's by everybody, though.
And you need to continue to run throughout your whole life.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's not quite that race, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to be doing this for a while?
I'm sure.
That's my last question.
Yeah.
You're in this for the long haul.
I started this work in many ways because of Colombia. Colombia's been in civil war since 1964. But violence there started with the assassination of a left-wing presidential candidate in 1948. And for those of us who are indigenous or come from the indigenous communities, violence started for us with colonialism. But Colombia is in the longest civil war in the hemisphere. But I didn't really become active or vocal about my own struggle first. The first thing that I really became active about was the U.S.'s second invasion of Iraq in 2003. I was in high school.
That's what activated you.
And I had a friend and a partner who brought me to a protest downtown Youngstown. I got a couple buttons that said, "Democratic women are the life of the party," and I don't know that I would call myself that now, but I know that I'm the life of the party. And this resistance is patriotism. And I was worried because I didn't tell my parents I was going to the protest that they would see me on TV and that I would get in trouble. And of course, my parents have supported my activism very well and deeply. So that actually was a silly worry of mine. But I was so moved by the commitment to nonviolence that I had seen around me. And I knew just in my gut that that invasion was wrong and that it was for resources and not people, to protect resources and not people. And so I got involved there. And now here we are starting a war with Iran this week, potentially.
Yep.
And so hopefully not. And so unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to be here for a really long time until all wars are over and until we have and we see collective liberation.
There's a live show tonight in the sanctuary upstairs where we're staying, and I'm supposed to be helping with the sound equipment. I don't know how much I'm going to be helping, so we have to end it here. And I'll say again,
Great talking with you, Alan.
Great
Thank
talking
you
with you.
so much.
Chrissy Stonebraker-Martinez of the InterReligious Task Force on Central America and Columbia. She's the co-director there.
It's been a lot of fun.
I'm glad we got the time to sit down. I've been wanting to talk
Me
to you
too.
since last year.
I hope that it was beneficial.
And I got to talk to you and Mark.
Meaningful, yeah.
Meaningful, absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt about it. Thank you again. This has been a Bar Crawl Radio Extra. Conversations with 5 Witness Against Torture activists at the First Trinity Lutheran Church in Washington, D.C. on the 18th anniversary of the creation of Guantanamo Prison in Cuba. And make sure to check out our conversation with Chrissy and 3 other activists for peace and common sense, recorded at the Dubliner Bar in D.C. on Bar Crawl Radio number 77.